And we're live. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining today. Today, I'm lucky to be joined by Ryan Killian from RENU Management. Ryan's been present there and founder since the very beginning, and along the way, various roles in operations, leadership roles across various single-family residences in the business, and a ton of experience in growing this, modeling it, and living through the kind of cycles we're living through right now. We've had a lot of conversations throughout the years around the last couple of years, at least, around operations and how operations can be improved, how it's a big part of the business, etc. So excited to talk to Ryan about getting to hell yes, especially for RENU, and what you guys are looking for customers, how you're different, all those sort of things. For everyone listening, this is your first time listening to the show. We talk about getting to hell yes. Specifically, we're talking about, how do we identify buyers that are down funnel, that are seeking alternatives, that are frustrated with what they've what they've had to use in the past. How do we find buyers that are already dialed in on the problem they're seeking to solve? They're able to articulate it. Maybe they've Googled it. Maybe they've already tried something else that didn't work out, right? And those buyers are the ones that we want to kind of act on and match them in with their differentiations. So we'll talk about, obviously, RENU's differentiators, how you guys compete. And we'll get into a little bit around just how that creates into a winning culture, a winning approach, and how you kind of see things down the road in the future. We'll get into more of that as we go along the way. For everyone listening today, once again, if you're listening on the live, please add in your comments. We'll see your comments as they come through. We'll be able to respond to those in real time. If you're catching this afterwards in the live, feel free to put any comments on the LinkedIn thread there. We'll get notifications. We'll be able to respond to those. If you're listening to the podcast or on Apple or Spotify, like, subscribe, that kind of stuff. It makes it easier for people to find the show. And as always, any comments you have or feedback you have for either of us is greatly appreciated. It just makes for a better conversation down the road. So this is brought to you by IRCX. IRCX is AI remote maintenance software and inspection software for property management. We help you see the problem before you dispatch a truck, close work orders faster, do inspections faster, do turns better. That's what we do. And as always, we kick it off with a quick hand over to Ryan for a bit of your background. How did you get in this role? You've been in it for a while. And how did you get started, get emerged? How did you figure out this problem to be solved? And has the problem changed from when you first started the company to where you are today? What's the problem you solve? Go from there.
Yeah, thanks, Guillermo. First, thanks for having me. Grateful to be here. I'm a fan of what you're doing here and the content you're putting out there and kind of shining a light on some of these issues that a smaller and getting larger circle of professionals are seeing out there. Love the angle of getting to a hell yes. It gives me the chance to say hell on a live podcast as many times as I want, right? With impunity.
Full permission.
Yeah, love it. I had pretty well-rounded background in real estate. Started out of college, out of grad school, with a private mixed-use developer. Did some white elephant hunting for acquisitions, and really got to understand the underlying value of real estate, how to underwrite, a mixed-use development, et cetera. Went on and got some more institutional experience with an office and industrial owner of assets. Did some leasing, understood kind of the corporate structure. And then I went into brokerage, residential brokerage for a while. And then I relocated from the Northeast down to Charleston, South Carolina, and did a little bit more brokerage, but ultimately landed with American Homes for Rent back in 2012. Nice. So that's kind of the start of when I got into this sort of space. It gave me, and this is back in the early days, right? The Wild West, as it's fondly called, and anybody who's been in the SFR circle for the short, decade and change. A lot of fun, learned a lot. It was almost unbelievable what was happening as it was happening. But that's when I got my real first, I would say, maybe the light bulb moment of really how scale can impact a business. Because of how fast we were moving back then, and a lot of smart people who decided now's the time to, try to do what multifamily is doing, right? And own single family scattered assets around the country, geographically decentralized, and try to operate them at a profit, which at that time wasn't really known if that could be done. And that's, what the the financial crisis offered was an opportunity to get in at a low price point, so that even if you were wrong and you couldn't operate it at a profit, you weren't going to get hurt too bad. So obviously, history being what it is and doing its thing, Invitation, American Homes for Rent, Progress, FirstKey, so on and so forth, have proven that it's absolutely an operating model that can scale and that can make money and that can serve residents and offer another housing solution. So, it was a lot of fun after American Homes for Rent, doing running acquisitions for them for a while, and then also helping set up various different functions of the company, like, maintenance and turns and construction, et cetera. Moved on to FirstKey Homes, who got into the game in 2017 with a small portfolio purchase, and then was looking to, acquire a significant portfolio of homes quickly without the benefit of the margin for error that some of us had in the early days, right, in 2012 and 13, because, you were back to, 85, 90% of 2007 values by 2017. So, underwriting had to get that much tighter. Understanding how the assets were going to perform once you acquired them was critical. And then actually, performing, right? Actually executing to that underwrite was the trick. So that was where the lessons I had learned at AMH, kind of hit a new gear in terms of understanding, operational excellence, the acute feedback loop that is necessary between operations and an investment committee or acquisitions to make sure that, understanding what's the goal, what are we buying, what's it look like, and then how can we perform both today and with a couple of initiatives, how can we perform in the future? So, the lessons I've learned and the smart people I've worked with who've taught me so much along the way is just too many to name, but it's been a great run. Then, COVID hit and we all got thrown for the proverbial loop. And my now partner and the actual founder of RENU, co-founder of RENU, Travis Bonwell, the CEO and my partner and friend. Yeah. He gave me a call and said, hey, the institutional capital's coming back, we're through the COVID, doldrums here, and I'm going to start building some portfolios for these folks. And RENU at the time was managing about 1,000 homes, single family largely. But it was going to need to be prepared to manage 10,000 plus very quickly. So he gave me a call. We chatted, talked about how we would, build the platform with intention, given all the things I had learned and seen, and the industry had learned and seen, from 2012 to that point. And recognize that I remember he challenged me. He said, I want you to come here and build an operating platform and a system that is so sound and so excellent that even average execution will beat the competition. Right. I remember that. And, it was a great challenge because it's hard to do. It's not just about the system. It's not just about the tech. It's about the people too, as we know. And really those three legs of the stool have to kind of both be the same size and the same amount of thickness. Otherwise the stool's going to fall over. So, long story, a little bit shorter. We, came over and we got to work right away. We were buying 700-800 homes a month, one by one at the time, back in 2021. And we were, continuing to modify and build and strengthen, an already robust management platform that was purpose-built for geographic decentralization, scattered assets. And then, over the years, we continued to still hone today, and realized how, relevant that model was and could be for, kind of tangential asset classes like build to rent, which look and feel a lot more like multifamily, but aren't quite multifamily. So, we've used all those lessons to, to continue to build and leverage a centralized platform to make sure that we're only doing what's necessary to be done on site, and then excelling at it, right? And having, visibility throughout the platform, institutional grade asset management and reporting, all of which, again, to keep that tight, acute feedback loop in order, right? The capital, the tech stack, and then the operational execution.
And if I remember correctly, along the way, in terms of the problems you guys solved, you guys also help acquire, you help renovate, you help manage all that stuff all along the way, and then manage those properties and have those properties, go through their own life cycle. But it's not just the acquire a property, manage a property business. There's also the whole called the value add parts of the management pieces that you guys did. And you guys have done like over 10,000 homes over the years.
We've managed as many as 15,000 over the years.
Yeah.
And we've deployed over 5 billion in capital on the acquisition side. And really that was how RENU was built. Again, before my time, when Travis founded the company back in 2009, before I was here, it was built to source, acquisition targets based on capitals at the capital's direction of a buy box to aggregate and source acquisitions, then underwrite them and manage the transaction all the way through to closing. So, to put into the population of the property management ecosystem. And
when you're managing and doing those renovations, did you get to, into the context of the standardized approach to doing things, did you get to kind of like standardized renovations for those specific SFRs? Like I know they're scattered, they're different, but in terms of like, we put this in, we put this in, we put this in, we take this out, we take this out, we put this in. Was that kind of was there a playbook around that?
Yeah, it was client dependent. And again, I mean, back at AMH and FirstKey, yes, absolutely. Right. When I was there and you've got one captive and you've got one capital partner and they are dictating and calling the shots, and with the acquisition committee or the investment committee and acquisitions team identifying what do we want this asset to look like? What's our budget? How much do we want to put in? And how do we want to go after rents? It's all a formula, and those levers can be pulled, right? But when I've come to RENU, so anyway, with respect to AMH and FirstKey, obviously, yes, you've got a relatively decent standard. Of course, no SFR scattered asset is exactly the same, right? It's not like, again, it's not like doors in a hallway in an apartment building. So you can't quite have the standardization, but to the extent you can, yes, absolutely, we did. When I came over to RENU and we had multiple clients we were acquiring for, they all had slightly different strategies and philosophies on exactly how much they wanted to improve the home, exactly how they wanted to approach, their rent. Do we want to be at market rent? Do we want to push rents? That dictated sometimes how much they improved the home and what they wanted it to look like. And, that's one of our value adds, right, is the ability to aggregate that information. And given that we have the acquisition, background and underwriting background, we were in a unique position to be able to advise on what pulling each of those levers could potentially do to the outcome, right? Because
the reno in that context isn't just to renovate the things that aren't working; it's to make it more rentable and sustainable in the long run.
That's right. Yeah, you've got your players that want to spend less capital, and they're okay with not achieving the highest market rent. That's okay, right? That's their place in the marketplace. That's the strategy they've underwritten. You got other players, many of which we know, like AMH, right, who's going to do as much as they possibly can within reason to make sure that they can achieve those high rents and have a premier resident experience.
I think one of the things that's really interesting, and you mentioned kind of the big five, big four, like AMH, Computer FirstKey, Invitation Progress, Tricon. Like, I know I'm missing one or two, but like what I find interesting talking to all of their leaders is that they all operate differently. Like they all have a different, sausage recipe. And I find that super interesting because like here you've got a brand new industry, relatively speaking, and you've got operators that are the dominant players in the market that hold the lion's share of the units under management. And you've got some that only manage what they own. You've got some that do a bit of third party. You got some that are acquiring, like it was Invitation that got Starwood, right? They're buying different homes. They're having different sort of like models for growth. And I find it really interesting to kind of like scratch your head because it's like, it's exciting when there are different playbooks to achieve the same objective rather than just kind of repeat. Because you go from AMH to FirstKey, you're learning.
Yeah,
because it's FirstKey may have mostly in-house techs, I can't remember Invitation or Progress. They do a mix or whatever, but however it's all done, we're getting to the stabilization period, and because everyone's kind of worked for a lot of each other, you get a sense of a best practice is not a best practice, a best fit is emerging in terms of like what to do, when, and where. And then you look at you guys where you're at. And you've done this horizontal bit from the underwriting, the acquisition, the finding, the renovating, the whole thing. And now that full life cycle where we're at right now in the market, you're kind of like matching that market, which is also kind of an exciting conversation. Because when we're going through that escalation and remodeling and establishing of the industry, you guys are a big part, played a big role for a lot of investors in achieving their goals to where they were able to be in a position to where they are today. And like, there's often not that available to a lot of people to be able to kind of walk in and say, wherever RENU is today, you are a reflection of the end-to-end service that's required for an investor. Now, what's interesting is that where you are today? Are you guys still doing those things, or are you principally focusing on property management? And where do you see where the industry's going?
Yeah, it's a great question. All great points. The short answer is yes to both.
Mm-hmm.
So we're, right now with obviously interest rates being what they are and single family scattered, acquisitions and growth organically being somewhat like suppressed, right? There's less opportunity to perform, to go out and hunt for acquisitions to grow portfolios. It's just the nature of the game where we are in the cycle right now. What we've seen, we're still having those discussions. We're still doing it here and there as we can. We still look at a lot of portfolios. A lot comes across our desk given our, how much we've deployed in the past. But what we're seeing a lot of opportunity in right now is, and for the last couple of years, really are owners of portfolios that have a feeling that they could be getting more out of the portfolio, that they're, these are capitals that, groups that have, either go directly to the property manager to handle their asset management, or they've got an asset management layer in between, but they are, they're not sure they're getting the most bang for their buck. They're leaving, NOI on the table, right? In some way, shape or form. And really to your question, right, this is, the problem that we're trying to solve is, squeezing every last drop of that NOI out, while still providing, a superior experience to the resident. So what we're winding up seeing is a little bit of cleanup duty, right? Some, portfolios or sites specifically to BTR where, previous managers, had struggled to perform for one reason or another. They're all different. Sometimes it's macro reasons. Sometimes it's, site specific reasons. Sometimes it's, it takes a while to figure out exactly what the issue was. But fundamentally, I think what we've noticed is that there's a model that allows us to right off the bat, without outperforming a previous manager, right? Is really our pricing model and our centralization strategy. Given that we had to build a very lean, centralized structure to make sure that we could have single family scattered assets that were all over the place perform at a relatively predictable clip, right? That the capital group could depend on, bank on, many of whom they've got debt covenants they've got to meet. In order to do that, we were able to leverage this centralized, structure to have full visibility, systems in place that surface problems before they become real problems, right? And ultimately, system-wide accountability and organizationally wide accountability to make sure that we're able to, to see all those problems. So as we're deploying these types of solutions, we're finding that, hey, we can also do this, with a pricing structure that is, oftentimes better than what we're seeing coming out of multifamily. You don't, rather than getting, build back to the site an entire, a 6-person team, through the RENU optimized model, you're seeing that only takes 3 people to do that on site because we do function X, Y, and Z centrally. And we pass those savings on to the capital. So that, again, right off the bat, you're able to squeeze a little bit more out of the NOI without affecting performance.
Well, I think when you get into the innovation, talk about pricing, packaging, ideal customer, like all those things start to create a whole new way of doing things that, while on the surface, like BTR may look a lot like multifamily from the satellite, but ultimately, like it would be hard to differentiate if you're to walk a property of a BTR community and maybe a garden style community. There's side by sides, they're front garage, all those things, but like they're operated very differently. And I think that's something that you mentioned earlier in the conversation around that feedback loop. Like, explain a little bit about the feedback loop that you described. How does that different in SFR/BTR versus multifamily experience? How does that feedback happen?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know that it's that different. I mean, the feedback loop, it's critical to understand performance in real time, right? And to be able to slice it and dice in various different ways. The best way I know how to do that, right? I mean, again, we have a talented team. I have a talented software and engineering team, and data and analytics team, and they are tremendous at finding ways to, slice and dice information that offers, actionable insights, and that goes right back to the capital group. Hey, here's what we're seeing. Here's how we're performing. And here's all the initiatives we've tried to make your turn costs lower, right? That said, if we're going to still deliver a premier resident move-in experience and limit work orders in the first 90 days after move-in, it's still coming out to this number. Now, this could be the way you design the BTR, model, right? The actual units, whether it's townhomes or single family detached. So I guess the only way it's different is that in these capital groups that are own BTR, is you can inform them on how to design going forward. And hey, if limiting your turn cost to $1,500 a year on average from up to year 5 is critical to making your underwrite work, then we've got to redesign this in a few different ways. And here's how. And here's what our insights tell us. The only way to do that is to track as much data as you can, right? So, and that's what our teams are so focused on, is capturing as much as we can at scale reliably, so that we can have, even if it's not of use today, so that we can have, data points to be able to manipulate and pull later to inform the current client or a future client on how to get into an asset at the right price or in the right way to ensure performance is relatively certain.
What I thought was, interesting, talking about like the influence on the build, the construction, of the renovation, talking how that kind of like relates, how that translates into amenity revenue and different pricing for different products. And some of the conversations, Colin was mentioning last week, talking about how fences and porches and covers and things like that happen at a unit level that can be deployed for in a renovation or if you're doing a build design, how all those things can relate to the revenues being captured. But what I found really interesting in terms of this feedback loop conversation is that you're able to experiment on specific types of amenities for specific homes and figure out if that's going to work. So a fence is an example, right? Minimal interruption to the overall, core asset, but does it affect rent? And then you can start looking at, okay, if I put a fence down, it's going to cost like this. It's going to depreciate like this, 10 years, 12 years on a fence. And then I'm going to be able to maybe paint it twice. And that's going to drive my rent up by an extra $150 a month, $200 a month. That's almost 10% of the overall rent value for a bunch of, 5x8, 6-inch planks and some 4x4s. Like it's kind of crazy when you kind of begin to log that data that relates to the value that's being delivered to the resident and ultimately capital is being deployed back to the owner. That's the part where I'm saying, like, and then you talk about, or not, but like Loman talks about this and other writers talk about this in SFR. Northam talks about this too, like how the churn rate, because the unit count is smaller on an owner basis, you get kind of more volatility in churn. And that volatility, and that's natural, but that volatility in churn gives you a chance to experiment more often and figure out what really works. So, it's,
you're right. Yeah.
Because like you lose customers. Like one thing that I've learned in our business is you learn way more from the no's than you do from the yeses.
Yeah.
And that feedback loop that you spoke about, when it's kind of like that unit economics level, that feedback loop helps you drive a decision for the next chunk, the next cohort of units.
Yep.
And like, I would just think that the learning would be so much more like the steeper curve than what you've got inside, I'll say, conventional property management, just because of the churn rate that's natural in SFR. And, I think it's also what's also driving this BTR invention to solve the problem between the multifamily operations that are, kind of site level, the distributed nature of scattered site, the customers that want to live inside a home with a fence, et cetera. And then the operations model that you're talking about, which doesn't exist in conventional multifamily. And then they really tried to do it, but it's kind of largely, it's been a bit of a meh. And like now you're looking at this new invention of BTR, and it's kind of exciting because it's going to fill a lot of gaps. And because it's designed and purpose built for rental rather than renovated to rental, it's exciting to kind of think about how that's going to change the market.
Agreed. A lot of great points you made in there. Yeah, I think the critical part is you said it right. Is whether you're in acquiring SFR or BTR, or frankly, if you're trying to go to school on how to develop your next multifamily project, understanding what has historically been done, and then factoring that in to your plans, underwrite, whatever it might be, site identification is critical. And the other piece that has to come along with it is your current evaluation of the market in play, right? I mean, what are rents doing? Obviously right now we're expecting another year of depressed rents. No real surprise there. We'll likely come out of that in the year after that, hopefully, or possibly in early 28. But understanding how those two things, I think the trick is to continue to stay bullish and intentional about building a good product that's going to, and not cut too many corners, whether you're building or developing or whatever, a new product, despite the fact that, you're not going to have the crazy rent spikes that we saw, coming out of COVID. Those spikes bailed a lot of folks out who were not in the best operational place post COVID. And then, again, back to kind of circling around to what we're looking at now is kind of mop up duty on some, on some sites or portfolios that once the rental prices normalized and, sort of stayed around zero in terms of year-over-year appreciation, that's when operational excellence is at a premium. And that's when it feel like, RENU can kind of step in and look for the customers that, either know for sure, hey, my operational execution is subpar. I need it to get better. Or they don't know. I don't know. I can't figure this out. I'm not getting what I should get. I know that rents are bad, but it's not this bad. That's where we get to step in. And, again, I don't want to pretend like there's some blanket solution to this. There's not. This is it's a case by case, asset by asset, property by property, location by location, analysis, case study. And, the team at RENU, our team, prides itself at diving deep and really understanding the nuances and not trying to slap a playbook that's generically and largely going to work at many sites. This is a custom solution environment that we live in. And that's really what's required to squeeze every drip that we can out of the NOI.
And it's interesting to think about, like, just even the words you're using, right? Because that NOI is something you're seeking to drive that out at the door level, whereas at multifamily, it's like the property level, right? So you have like 300 units that can actually, there's a ton of buffer between the individual unit churn and the NOI of that overall property relative to SFR BTR, where it's a door, right? Like NOI per door is a different level of granularity. And when you kind of get down that level, you start seeing things a little bit differently because you're looking at through a completely different lens, and there's a detail orientation that just isn't. I don't want to. I mean, obviously, lots of multifamily people we work with, but it's like it's just not. It's maybe not natural, normal, or doesn't make that much of a difference. And I think that what's interesting that we're coming into right now, as we're chatting before, is like we're getting into this world where that door level NOI makes a difference. Yeah. And I just think it's going to be so exciting to watch this next couple of years. There's a great, do you follow F1? Like great Ayrton Senna quote that talks about, he says, now he did die in a crash, so it's for what it's worth. Can't pass 15 cars in the sunshine, but I can in the rain, right? Yeah. And the thing is that those that know how to accelerate around the corner, and those that are able to navigate the calamity of what's going on, and that sense of expertise and operational excellence, that's the rain, right? That's what's going to separate the winners and losers. And those that have a leaning towards, of course, we sell technology, that leaning towards technology, and those that have an operational excellent approach to doing things, it feels like the only playbook. Like the other playbooks are just like, that's great, but that's 2023's playbook. That's not even applicable anymore.
You're right. I mean, you're what you're talking about is one of the oldest kind of cliches in the book, but it's cliche for a good reason, right? Aim small, miss small, right? Let's
Sure.
focus on this property, this unit. How is it performing? And if you do that and stack those wins up, right, the portfolio or the property or however you're slicing the cohort is ultimately going to still look good. But again, just to reiterate, I think that's where we have whether intentional or not, you decide, that's where we have a benefit, right? Because of the way we had to build our tech stack, build our systems and standard operating procedures, and then train our team and, and mold our team to think about assets is at the asset level, not at the property, not at the big property, the site level. It's at the property level, individual units. What decision am I making, the right decision on this turn bid today for this property? And that doesn't just mean, am I going to hit a budget that's going to overall make sure the turn budget for this entire building is met? That means, is this decision I'm going to make, could that actually hurt my turn budget? Yes. But at the end of the day, is it needed? And am I going to limit work orders for the move-in of the next resident? And is it going to be a happy experience as opposed to somebody who's got an air conditioner failing in the first 3 months of living there, who's not going to renew? Then you're going to have more vacant days on your property, right? So again, every little decision has an impact, has an intended and unintended impact. And those little impacts, and unintended decisions add up. And ultimately they both hurt that property potentially, or help that property. And then ultimately they roll up and hurt the entire, or help the entire portfolio or property site level. So I think, again, having an ecosystem and environment where you can track extremely granularly, stay within certain guidelines, make sure you're making the right decision in that moment for that property at that time. And then having a team that's just, undyingly passionate about doing the right thing, both for our clients and our residents and you can't have both despite popular belief. I think that's really kind of the magic mix for RENU.
So when you guys talk to you've got a legacy of building out the centralized motion. You've got a legacy of building out this operating model that drives NOI specifically at the door level for your investors and for your owners and investors, customers, clients, driving that positive resident experience. You talked a bit about pricing earlier. How do you innovate on pricing?
Great question. And again, every site's different, as I mentioned, but I think the best way to put it is that, again, we're finding sites that we're taking over, BTR sites and multifamily alike, where we're seeing, the previous management company following a somewhat archaic or proven, time tested and proven. I shouldn't say archaic. I mean, the multifamily model has worked for decades, right? This is, it's been proven. It's now going through a point of inflection because of SFR and BTR kind of blending into it. And then, third-party management, coming from SFR, bringing those lessons over. And what they're finding, groups like us, and specifically RENU here, right? We are finding that given that our platform was built to have many different functions operate in a remote environment, the central environment. Think of things that don't need to be done on site, whether you're in an apartment building or a single family BTR complex with a full amenity stack and it's purpose built for renters. Do you need to be on site to send a renewal email? No. Do you need to be on site to go through your collections practices? No. Maintenance triage, something you know a little bit about, I think, here, right, Guillermo? No, you do not, right? Many different things don't need to be done on site. The multifamily model, and this isn't, a revelation, this is just fact, has excelled at hiring people for a specific site, putting them on site, and then that's your employee group in a box. That's your pod. They work on your site. Now, maybe you have two sites and they kind of share between a couple of different sites, but ultimately, I think just, intuitively, if you stop and think about it for a second, when you've got a finite product to work on and you dedicate personnel to it, there's going to be waste in that, right? There's going to be times where they're not doing their job. Now, maybe you've got a great team that is all type A personalities and they're overachievers. And if they're not doing their job because they've got extra time, they're doing somebody else's job. That's wonderful. But that relies on a couple of variables that you can't control easily, right? What we've done at RENU is leveraged our SFR decentralized model to make sure that everything that doesn't have to be done on site is done off site. So
Right.
that only leaves the things that, what do you have to do on site? You have to talk to
It's
residents, you have to greet
offsite
prospects.
approach, offsite first approach. And then you on exception, we move to onsite.
Yeah, well, and again, those exceptions are the obvious ones, right? Like greeting prospects that come in for tours, residents who come in and they need some FaceTime, or they've got an issue. They want to feel like they're part of a community. Your maintenance technicians, obviously, right? Those types of things, turn management and performance. All of those things have to be done on site. You can't not be at the home to do those things. So you take those things. What are your must-haves? They're on site. What are the things that you don't have to have on site? They're off site. And then each site and product being different, what is the gray area? And then that's when you get in and you dive deep and go, okay, is this a particular market where the resident base is expecting, more events on site? So I'm going to have an extra resident services coordinator on this site. I might not need it at this other site in this other market because that market doesn't need it. They don't rely on it, but this one does. So it's, again, that's where the customization comes. So it's the yes or no. Does it have to be on site? Yes, no. Put them in those buckets. And then what's the middle ground of, what's specific to this site? Understand that. And then you come up with your playbook for that site specifically. But again, we're seeing overhead costs solely, right? Be reduced by 50% or more in some cases based on whoever their previous management company was. So when I say pricing structure, that's what I mean. These are pass-throughs that where ownership groups have been trained that, okay, I'm going to pay for my entire site staff and my Yardi or Appfolio instance and, phones and hardware and computer. I'm going to pay for all that stuff. It's a pass-through. Plus I pay my management fee. Well, RENU aims to pass the savings that we realize by centralizing on to the owner. We give that right back to the owner, right? We're happy to have the business for our management fee and pass through what we have to. And this oftentimes, again, based on P&Ls that we've looked at and, trailing 12 financial statements that we'll take a peek at and say, hey, right off the bat, you're going to save money here, here, and here, right off the bat. That's before we even talk about where we think we can outperform your previous manager. So, that has been resonating for obvious reasons. It's the right environment for that type of message to be, to gain some traction.
What I find interesting about a couple points you talked about there is like around like the culture around remote first. It might start with simple stuff that's kind of obvious. That's very difficult to argue. Deposit reconciliation, payments, all that kind of stuff, right? Maybe sorry, not deposit, but like deposit collection, payments, all that stuff. But the more you get a culture around remote first, the more you start imagining what's next, because the mental barrier of considering how far you can push it starts crumbling down from the supplier side, from like the RENU side. And you start to imagine, hey, if we did that pretty well, then what about this? And then because you're able to experiment at the owner level on a unit by unit, or I'll say cohort of units, then you're able to experiment in smaller, quicker feedback loops that give you information back faster about what worked and what didn't work. And those kind of like, when you think about innovation and even learning, the compounding of learning is something that, it's like the miracle of compound interest, right? The compounding of learning that is available in your industry that's not, I'll say, to give them a pass, it's just not available, right? What's available in the compounding of that learning, that 1% each day, because there is, industry in our is like 22% turnover in single family. So that is going to give you a higher degree of learning, a compounding of those lessons that occur. That's going to drive out ultimately a better operating model, because you have that knowledge and experience of what worked and what didn't work. And that gives you the courage to be able to try to do new things. Whereas like often the single biggest objection we get from multifamily is, the inability to convince the owners that this is something to do, because of the PMAs are in place. I got to change this. I've got people that are assigned to a property, right? And that person is like part of the deal. So if I'm going to remove that head count, I'm kind of breaking the deal. And I get that. If you're a facilities leader and you didn't sign that lease, you didn't get bonus that thing, or that client, you didn't get that bonus in that, like I get, well, that's kind of like hands off. Like I kind of come to really appreciate those that are able to innovate in multifamily, because they have to have a pre-existing partnership with that client that we're going to try new things.
Yep.
But But generally speaking, it's all about more bodies. And I find that really interesting when you consider the proof is there. Like, it's like there's nobody is going to argue that it's not working.
Yeah.
And that's the part that I find really interesting to Ray's point, is like the multifamily and BTR, to do this a little bit easier, is like it's while it's obvious practically rationally, there's a cultural pushback, and it's kind of excuse making, it feels like sometimes, because of the PMAs that are existing. And so it's slowly happening, but it's happening with a lot more resistance on the multifamily side. And of course, you look at the units available to rent. So let's say 45 million, 15 in SFR, the 2 and change are institutionally managed. You got 30 million in multifamily, call that 3 or 4 million are institutionally managed. Like, the discipline around how that innovation is going to occur it's happening faster. And so you talked about pricing, you talked about amenities, you talked about your centralized model. Like, all those things are innovations that are not in themselves. They're kind of like core product innovations, but you add them and compound them together, and it creates a transformational innovation for the operation of a property, because they don't exist in isolation. They're a multiplier.
You're so right. You're saying it better than I could say it. That's exactly right. They have incremental values, and the value and accretion to the P&L is different for every property. It really is. I mean, but they all, I mean, intuitively, just stepping back, and anybody listening to us probably could, oh yeah, that makes sense. That's going to help. But those levers they multiply upon themselves too, right? If you implement them all at the same time, I mean, again, back to the compounding. The compounding is a great example, because if you've got your price savings or your fee savings, we'll call it, right, or your pass-through overhead savings, and you still feel confident in your execution. Again, you can have the same 3 managers manage the property for 3 years, in a row separately, and have the same performance operationally speaking. Just that cost savings is going to obviously help you every year and increase, each year. You add in some of these other things, like some of these operational benefits, and your overarching asset management, functions like pricing and strategic initiatives that are going to help a particular site or a particular portfolio. All of these things work together in unison to ultimately help you squeeze the most out of your NOI. That's why, again, I couldn't be prouder of our team, because our team takes all of these things very seriously, right? They really pride themselves on getting under the hood and understanding what is working, what isn't working, and what can we do differently. Yes, we're going to centralize things, and we're going to obviously probably have half the overhead on site. That's the low hanging fruit for us. Yeah. And again, we're at a strategic advantage because we've got a tech stack and a platform, and frankly, a human capital that's been kind of trained and brought up on this. So we're ready to roll. Culture, yeah, exactly. Most multifamily groups, they're thinking about this. They're, anybody who's not, I don't think anybody's not thinking about centralization and the benefits that they have. Whether you want to give it a name like AI or automation or integrate, whatever you want to call it, right? Having various different ways of centralizing and taking advantage of those economies of scale. Everybody's thinking about it. The trick is, especially for some of the big groups, is how do you do it? How do you execute? It's not easy. It's not easy to turn a tech stack around, or to rewrite workflows for the entire organization, or to compartmentalize workflows, to be able to have the ability to do things differently, right? I mean, think about this: a tech stack that has a workflow. Let's just take leasing, for example. If you're going to handle leasing the same exact way, you've got a playbook. You're going to do it the same way. Your data sets, your workflows, and everything is standard across those various different sites. And everybody's trained on them. They know what to expect. They know what to do. That limits your ability to customize a solution for a particular site or sites. Yeah. Luckily, fortunately, RENU has built its tech stack that's all. What's the right term? They're modules where we're able to, modify them by client as needed, by site as needed. And that flexibility and that, custom solution offering that RENU is out there offering gives you the ability to solve specific to a site, specific to a capital group's wants. They are wanting to push rents, so we need to have a more robust prospecting pipeline than we might have for another site who's not focused on pushing rent so much. So again, it's various different examples, but you're making the point that, having all of these things work in unison absolutely is a force multiplier.
And then then you add in, like you brought it in, like the AI conversation. I don't like, the AI piece, you barely have permission to talk about AI if you don't have like an understanding of your data. And it's very difficult to have an understanding of your data if you don't have a centralized function. It's like me talking about winning the 100 meters. Like, it's just not even, I don't have permission to have that conversation because of all sorts of different things. But to talk about AI, you're just really being just a passing comment about something that is so incredibly transformational in our world today that we're living through. So you talk about the different cultures. I think this is the part that's really exciting to kind of observe, is that the cultures around, I'll say, scrappiness, like scrappy SFR versus institutional, speedboat versus aircraft carrier, right? We're going to see this AI as a multiplier for both. Well, if you can apply it across those different compounding functions, and given that you guys have built your own tech stack, which I also think is a super interesting observation, because Evernest built their own, you guys built their own. I know that two of the majors have they've got a mix of commercial off the shelf with built their own stuff. And because the models didn't work for that agility that was required for SFR. And so you add in AI on top of it all, and being able to be AI first, remote first, data first, centralized first, it gives you such a path forward when it comes to how we're going to go win customers in this emerging market. And so if we're going to be 45 million rentals next year, and let's call it maybe 46 by the end of the year or a couple of years, and that's going to start stabilizing housing prices, and it's going to have maybe a nominal effect on the way rents, where the opportunity for rents to go up. But ultimately, there's so much left in the middle that is available to capture. We talk about putting a fence in, right? If that can raise your rent $200, then all of a sudden that's a 10% increase on NOI for a asset that doesn't really depreciate at the same rate as a gym or something else, right? Mm-hmm. And being able to drive those kind of initiatives that relate to driving up NOI, it becomes very tactical in the approach and data driven versus kind of emotion driven, or we've always done it this way driven, or we're not allowed to do that driven. I think that's the thing that's exciting about talking to yourself and the other operators in the space, is that we're coming into this world where there's a margin in the middle that's going to be up for grabs. And it's going to feel like a jump ball, but the advantage is going to be so much more in the favor of those that are able to deliver a data-driven experience. And so I really have empathy for those that are in organizations that don't allow that. And I have more empathy for those that are in senior positions and their hands are tied, because they're just kind of walking the earth. They're not able to make a change in a world where so much is changing all at the same time. And it's exciting to have conversations with folks like yourself who've gone and built the tech stack, built the operating model, deployed the services to people, proving it out with data, and then able to go forward and say, okay, what market's next? Because you've moved from the SFR scattered site into BTR. So then what's next? That's the question to you.
Yeah, agree with all of that. Like the jump ball analogy too. But yeah, I mean, next for us is multifamily, right? We're also we've launched multifamily last year. We're growing that now as well. Again, all fundamentally based on this centralized model. And obviously, and again, this is, to be clear, this isn't us saying our SFR model works perfectly for BTR and then works perfectly for, no, that's not true, right? They are modified. We've got teams. My team would shoot me if they heard me say that, right? It's very clear. Our teams in the background are working diligently to make sure we know the exact difference in precise SOPs and process differences and nuances between traditional scattered site SFR single site, purpose built BTR, whether it be townhomes or single family detached, and multifamily. There are subtle but serious and meaningful nuances between the three of them. Again, they're all fundamentally based on a centralized structure that allows us to pass through savings to an owner. But at the end of the day, in order to still execute and perform in the same way we would have expected if it was just traditional SFR, they've got to be customized for each, again, just think about basic things like, having doors in a hallway and, making sure you've got the right inventory and the right technicians hired so that they can go churn and burn through turns or work orders any given day. That's going to look different for SFR, right? So those processes and workflows are all slightly different and modified. But again, for us, it's about the never-ending pursuit of operational excellence, right? So, if this space wasn't moving so quickly and in this transition, I'd be bored personally. What gets me juiced up and charged up is that every day's different, every week's different, every year's different, every client's different, every property has its different challenges. And on top of that, we've got the, layer in artificial intelligence and centralization, any other buzzword you want to layer in there. All of this makes it all so juicy and fun and challenging and beautiful. And if you can figure out a way to look at your budget at the end of the year and say, man, I outperformed that budget and we were actually aggressive this year, it's like a symphony that you just watch being conducted and all you can do is stand and applaud, right? So, that's what we're focused on here, and that's what's next for us.
I think that's what makes it really quite exciting. Like if I put myself as a buyer, right, I've got a weird, call it the 150, like the awkward size multifamily site. I got a 150 unit garden style in New England, and it's I'm going to tender for my property manager, and I'm going to get two bids that look a lot the same. Right. And they kind of read the same. The numbers are the same. Everything looks the same. The logos are different, but everything looks pretty much the same. And then I get something that comes from you guys. And it's going to be like I won't even be able to compare it. So now you're not competing on price anymore. Because it's not like 2%, amenity revenue, people, like you just tick and bop. And it's like, okay, if you would buy the first two, you kind of go, okay, well, who's going to lower this price and who's going to be better at this and that? Who's going to be better at that? But like you're talking about a different way of doing it, because the old way, by the way, isn't work anymore. And here's the reason why: 1, 2, 3. And then if I'm the buyer, I'm like, I get that. It's so obvious about that. And here's the why it's different. Here's the proof, and here's how we're going to do it. Here's our customers. Do you want to talk to 3 of them because they're thrilled because they outperformed, right? They outperformed their peers, their market, and et cetera. I think that's the exciting part, because it's not up to us as technologists anymore to kind of evangelize. Like folks like yourself have done it for us. You've proved that, you can hire, you can vend, or you can use tech and process, and you're outperforming with tech and process. And that goes you in a competitive bid scenario. And as I'm reading these three proposals, 2 sound like craftsmanship. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to fall between these 2 things. The other one feels like it's like a symphony. We're going to just like run this thing like a military operation. Here's how it goes. And because I know the inputs that go into A and how they come out of part B, and we've done this before, and we've systematized it and it's data-driven, then we know what the output's going to look like. And then for you, it's like, to the owner's conversation, it's like, we didn't lose on price. We lost on choice. And she can go, hey, how do you want to choose? Right? And for those that are seeking to absorb maybe the change or the difference of it all and choose RENU, they're going to get the results that are different than, and I would say even less variable than the old way of doing it. It may not, how the world does whatever the world does, but you're able to reduce the variability of the outcome because you're data driven and data oriented in process and tech. And that's just not available in the I'll call it the craftsmanship approach to doing things. Like you go to IKEA, there's 10,000 chairs look exactly the same. You go to a custom craftsman in the middle of Pennsylvania and everyone's going to look different. They're going to be charming. Like that's not what I want to buy. I want predictability in my outcome. I don't want variability, because I tell you what's not variable: my loan payment, my financing date. That's not variable. And my banker doesn't want to see this. My banker wants to see this because that's going to work on my capital side of things. And I think that's like part of the excitement I'm getting and talking to more and more folks as we're going through this transition. As you know, we would all love rents to go up, but they're probably not. And they're probably not for 1, 2, 3 years. More supply is going to come online. We're going to have more innovations that happen. And I think the exciting part is acknowledging that that's not going to be the go-to. It's going to be how we run things. And like that Six Sigma approach to operations is going to reveal opportunity that never existed before. And I'm thrilled to hear that you guys are going in the multifamily space because like that opportunity is going to present itself. And those that have the ultimate choice, the owners, the buyers, they're going to start seeing results that are different than they've ever seen before. And that's so exciting. Like for a Q1 conversation, that's so exciting. Oh, you're muted. Still muted. You back?
How about now?
You're good now. There you go.
Sorry about that.
No,
Everything you said is exciting. Makes me want to run through a wall. And I think
100%.
At the end of the day, this space is in its operator era right now, right? We're in operations era of operational excellence. This is the time. Anybody who gets excited about what we're talking about right now, this is your time. This is your time to tighten up, to think creatively, to challenge everything you thought you knew and that the space tells you should know, and that this is how things are done. This is the time to challenge all of it and to find really smart people that are passionate about operational excellence and let them run. Give them tools, give them guidance, and let them run. Now is the time.
Yeah, it's very cool. If you're feeling malaise about your role, then you're probably the wrong place.
That's right. I agree.
There's no reason to feel that at all.
Yeah.
You know. When we talk about a couple last things, close it out. When you look back over your career, and it's great that you've worked with all these different operators. What do you wish you would have told yourself 20 years ago?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. Jeez. What would I have told myself 20 years ago? I mean, one thing that I've had some great mentors in my life. And one of them told me to listen more. As you can tell, I don't have a problem talking. So yeah, it takes one to know one, I guess. One of the lessons I got early on from this particular mentor was, hey, you have a lot of good things to say, but don't let it drown out. Don't let it be drowned out. Listen more. Listen for pain. Listen for frustration. People will tell you what they need. You don't need to tell them. And I've tried to heed that advice over the years, but I would probably turn that up 2 or 3 notches because really, at the end of the day, that's what we're here to do. And as it, fast forwarding back to today, right? What do I try to do today whenever I'm talking to a prospective client or a current client or really anybody that wants to have a conversation about the space and how to make their properties perform better? Listen first. I try not to come out of the gate with the solution because you don't know the solution yet is the real answer, right? You might have a part of the answer, but you certainly don't have the whole answer. So listen, pay attention. The answer will surface to you if you are paying close enough attention.
Mm-hmm. I know that personally. Nothing to add to that. Who should we have on the show next?
Oh man, who should you have on the show next? I mean, honestly, anybody that you can have this type of conversation with and keep this operational conversation going would be something I personally enjoy. I enjoy having these conversations. I enjoy listening to them. I'm appreciative of the comments that have come through. I see Ray on here. Have you had Ray Hespin on yet?
Ray's a beauty. We've had him once. I think we were trying to line up a second one. We're overdue. I had him almost this time last year.
He's
overdue. Him and I
learned to shine away from a microphone either, but he'd be an interesting conversation, I would think.
I mean, just whenever even our preamble when Ray and I chat like that's a show by itself. Just a few more. That's an adult. That's what he called. That's got the explicit E conversation on it.
That's right.
Yeah, no, Ray and I are overdue. So Ray, if you're listening, I'll text you right away and we'll get something set up. But yeah, there's lots to talk about. I think it's just so exciting. And I just, the conviction around the people we've been able to chat with, the sophistication of the people we know to chat with, it's really thrilling, so appreciate you coming on today, sharing your stories. Appreciate all the comments today. I think that the story needs to be told louder more often in terms of what's happening, what's possible. There certainly is a conventional thinking that needs to get broken down. And I really do believe, and I hope that these conversations help unlock more originality around what we can do with the current situation, because the old tools just don't work anymore. And they're exhausting, and they're hurting people's lives, and they're hurting residents' lives, and they're hurting P&Ls and underwritings and all that stuff. So it's exciting to have this conversation and talk so fanatically about your success in centralization, tech, and process, and how things are going. Thank you very much for all that. So everyone for listening. So thank you today, Ryan, for joining us. Thanks for chatting through. Apologies, Travis, around the founding thing. I get that right next time. Thank you for all your conversations and sharing, especially your experience throughout those different journeys in your career, and ultimately talking through the gaps that we're feeling today, why people buy, how you guys can go beat in the market. The thrilling conversation, and I'm super excited for you guys. It's just like, it's awesome to be.
It's great. It's great. I always love our chats, live or on the side, but it's always great to chat with you, man. And keep up the great work with what you guys are doing at IRCX. Also, I really love the product, really love what you guys are doing, and really just love, the conversation that you're continue to kind of start and keep going around this space. It's a lot of fun.
Awesome. Appreciate it, Ryan. All right, everyone. Thanks for today. Thanks for listening today. If you're on the podcast or on the live, hit thank, follow, and all those kind of good things. That's good for everyone to find us. Thanks, Ryan, for finding us. And take care, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Cheers.
Thank you.